John Kane stood at the edge of the ballroom, champagne glass in hand, scanning the room with the quiet precision of a man used to reading markets, people, and motives. The Kane Innovations Gala had been his idea, celebrating the company's 15th anniversary, honoring investors, and quietly reminding everyone that no matter the headlines, he was the reason this empire existed. Aurora made her entrance 20 minutes late as always. She was stunning in emerald silk. Her blonde hair swept into a chignon, the picture of elegance, until she caught sight of her companion, a tall man in a navy suit, no more than 30, hovering near the bar. John's jaw tightened. The boy investor again. He didn't need confirmation to know something was off. Aurora had been dismissive for months, her absences increasing, her phone glued to her palm. He'd chalked it up to boredom, to her craving excitement in ways he didn't provide. "John," she called, weaving through guests with a smile that looked sharp enough to cut. "Come here, I want you to meet someone." The man stepped forward. "Ethan Marks," he said, extending his hand. "Big fan of your work, Mr. Kane." John took the handshake, firm grip, overcompensating. "I'm sure you are," John said evenly, releasing it. Aurora laughed too loudly. "Oh, don't be so serious, John. You make everything sound like a corporate takeover." She snagged a champagne flute from a passing waiter and drained half in one swallow. John studied her. "You've had enough, Aurora." She tilted her head, eyes glinting. "Have I? Or have I finally had just enough to tell the truth?" The chatter around them didn't quite die, but it shifted. People sensing something worth listening to. Aurora set her glass down with a decisive clink. "Let's not pretend, John. Everyone here knows you're brilliant. But as a husband?" She gave a sharp laugh. "You were temporary, a stepping stone until I found someone worth my time." The words hit like the sucker punch. Not because he loved her, he didn't. Not in the way people expected, but because no one ever blindsided John Kane. He forced his voice to remain level. "And Ethan Marks is worth your time?" She smiled like a cat with cream. "He makes me feel alive, not like I'm attending another board meeting in our kitchen." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Aurora, maybe this isn't—" "Oh, hush," she interrupted. "John needs to hear it. The man who prides himself on knowing everything didn't even see this coming." "Isn't that delicious?" A few guests exchanged uneasy glances. John's COO, Martha Lane, stepped closer. "Aurora, maybe we should step outside." "No, Martha. Let's give the king his dethroning right here," Aurora said, basing her voice just enough for the room to hear. John's fingers tightened around his glass until he set it down on the nearest table. "If this is your way of making a clean break, you've succeeded. I wish you both all the excitement you can stand." Aurora smirked. "Oh, I plan to." He turned to leave, but Ethan stepped in his path, as if trying to prove something. "Look, Kane, I didn't mean." John's gaze pinned him. "You'll learn something, Mr. Marks. You can take over someone's wife. You might even take over their place at the dinner table. But you'll never take over their mind. And you'll spend years realizing the difference." Ethan's mouth opened, then closed. Aurora rolled her eyes. Still the philosopher. "Enjoy your empire, John." "Oh," she glanced toward a nearby reporter. "If you still have one by morning." John didn't answer. He walked out of the ballroom, each step measured, calm on the outside while a storm gathered behind his eyes. Martha caught up to him in the hallway. "John, don't let this." "It's not about her," he cut in. "It's the principle." "I'm never caught off guard. And tonight?" He exhaled, slow and bitter. "She made me look like a fool." "You're not a fool," Martha said softly. "No," he agreed, straightening his tie. "But I was her stepping stone. And I don't intend to be anyone's ever again." Without another word, he walked into the cool night, leaving the warmth, the music, and Aurora's laughter behind. John walked into Kane Innovations headquarters the next morning in his usual tailored suit, coffee in one hand, tablet in the other, as if the gala disaster had been nothing more than a mild inconvenience. Employees glanced up from their desks, their greetings hesitant, eyes darting away too quickly. He ignored it. Control was everything. Martha was waiting by his office door. "Morning," she said, studying his face for cracks. "You're early." "I always am," John replied, stepping inside. "Let's get the Q3 numbers on my desk before lunch." Before Martha could answer, the glass doors to the executive floor burst open. Aurora swept in like she owned the place, emerald heels clicking across the marble. "Oh, don't mind me," she said loudly. "I'm just here to see my husband, the one who let me make a fool of him in front of the entire city." John didn't look up from his desk. "Aurora, this isn't the place." She laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. "Oh, come on, darling. I was expecting fireworks, a shouting match, something to prove you're not as cold and weak as people are saying." His phone buzzed. Without acknowledging her, he answered. "Kane." Aurora's smile faltered, then hardened. "That's it? No fight? No threats? Just business as usual? Pathetic." She lingered in the doorway a moment longer, then left, tossing over her shoulder. "You can pretend not to care, John, but everyone else sees it." The great John Kane, brought down by a woman. How tragic. The moment she was gone, whispers started. Martha shut the office door. "She's not going to stop, and if you lose it in public." "I'm not losing it," John said, though his jaw was tight enough to ache. "You've been taking deep breaths since she walked in," Martha pointed out. "I know you. You spent years learning to keep that temper in check. If you stay here, you'll hand her exactly what she wants. A scene to play for every camera in the city." John didn't answer. She took a step closer. "Let me get you out of town. Take a break. Let this noise die down before you ruin yourself and this company you built." He stared at her for a long moment. "You really think I'd ruin it?" "I think you're human," she said simply. "And she's aiming for the places you can't protect." Finally, John set down his tablet. "Fine, make the arrangements." Martha was already dialing. 2 days later, John Kane boarded the northbound train with nothing but a leather duffel and a laptop bag. The station was crowded with early commuters, their conversations merging into a low, constant hum. Martha had insisted he avoid flying, too visible, and had booked him a sleeper car under an alias. He wasn't running, he told himself. He was relocating for clarity. The whistle blew, and John stepped into the car, finding his seat. He had just settled in when the door slid open, and a woman with a canvas tote slung over one shoulder stepped in, guiding a boy of about 6. "Come on, Tony, seat numbers are right here," she said, glancing at the ticket. The boy, curly-haired and wide-eyed, stopped to stare at John. "Mom," he whispered loudly, "he looks like one of those traveling angels." John raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" Tony grinned. "Grandma said traveling angels show up when you need help most. Are you one?" The woman's cheeks flushed. "Tony, don't bother the man." "It's fine," John said, returning his gaze to the passing platform. "I'm not an angel, kid, just another passenger." Tony didn't look convinced. That's what an angel would say. The woman sighed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Sorry, he has a big imagination." John glanced at her properly this time. She was maybe early 30s, with tired eyes that still held a kind of light, wearing a paint-stained jacket. "You heading far?" "To my grandmother's cottage," she replied. "She passed away last month. Left it to me. It's out in the middle of nowhere." "Sounds quiet," John said. "That's the point." She smiled faintly. "I'm Manda, by the way." "This is Tony." "Don," he replied, offering a short nod. Tony leaned forward in his seat. "Do you fix things?" "Angels usually fix things." John smirked, despite himself. "Sometimes." The train lurched forward, carrying them out of the city. Manda busied herself with a sketchbook, Tony peppering her with questions about what the cottage might look like now. John stared out the window, the skyline shrinking in the distance. He didn't know it yet, but the boy's strange certainty would prove truer than anything he'd heard in years. By late afternoon, the train rolled into a small, rural station. The sky outside had darkened into an uneasy gray, clouds heavy with the promise of trouble. Manda shifted in her seat, nudging Tony awake. "This is us," she said, gathering her bags. John stood as well. Same stop. They stepped onto the platform, just as the wind picked up, rattling the old metal signs overhead. The scent of rain was thick in the air. Manda squinted toward a nearby gravel lot, where a small, dented hatchback sat waiting on a transport trailer. "Your car?" John asked. "Yep, not pretty, but it's all I've got," she replied with a shrug. A station worker lowered the vehicle. Manda loaded their bags into the trunk, while Tony bounced impatiently in the drizzle. John was about to head in the opposite direction when the first fat drops began to fall. Manda waved through the rain. "Hey, thanks for tolerating my son on the train." "Didn't take much," John said. She grinned, then slid behind the wheel. The engine coughed twice before catching, and she gave him a quick wave. But as she pulled out of the lot, John noticed the car sputtering, the exhaust spitting. He turned toward the road leading to his rental cabin, just as the rain came in hard, sheets of water blurring the horizon. Lightning forked in the distance. 15 minutes later, as he navigated the narrow, winding lane through the hills, he spotted the hatchback sitting at an awkward angle on the shoulder. Hazard lights blinked weakly through the downpour. John slowed, muttering under his breath, "Not my problem." But as he drew alongside, he saw Manda leaning over the wheel, Tony in the back hugging a stuffed dog. He tapped the horn and rolled down his window. "Car trouble?" Manda gave a helpless laugh. "It just died, and the tow truck says they can't get here until morning." John hesitated, every instinct telling him to drive on. But Tony leaned forward, face lighting up. "See, Mom, our angel came back." John groaned quietly. "My cabin just up the road. You can wait out the storm there." "Are you sure? We don't want to." "Just get in before you drown," he said. Minutes later, with their bags piled in his entryway and rain hammering the roof, John wondered when exactly he'd stopped minding their company. The storm broke by morning, leaving the air crisp and damp, the ground slick with mud. John drove Manda and Tony the rest of the way to her grandmother's cottage, a small, weathered structure nestled at the end of a dirt lane. The moment Manda unlocked the door, the smell of dust and mildew greeted them. Sunlight streamed through cracked window panes, catching dust motes in the air. "It's smaller than I remember," Manda murmured, stepping inside. Tony darted in ahead, his sneakers squeaking against warped floorboards. "It's perfect, like in the storybooks." John lingered in the doorway, scanning the place with the eye of a man who could spot a structural problem faster than a financial one. The roofline sagged slightly. The wiring in the kitchen was decades old. The porch steps were one misstep away from a lawsuit. "You'll need a new roof, and probably electrical rewiring," John said. Manda shot him a look over her shoulder. "Good morning to you too." "Just saying," he replied, stepping inside. "You can't live here without fixing the basics." "I don't know the first thing about repairs," she admitted. "My skill set is more in acrylics and charcoal sketches." Tony piped up, eyes bright. "You could help, right, John? Angels fix things. You said sometimes you do." John almost smirked. "I did say sometimes." "Please?" Tony leaned against the peeling doorframe, hands clasped dramatically. Manda rolled her eyes. "You don't have to. You've already done enough." But John looked around again. He could see the weight of it on her face. Trying to raise a child alone, rebuild a home, and start over without much money. "I'll take a look at the major stuff," he said finally. "If I'm here, might as well do something useful." By noon, John had made a list of repairs while Manda unpacked boxes in the kitchen. Tony followed him like a shadow, asking questions about tools and nails. When John drove into town for supplies, he could feel the eyes on him. At the hardware store, two women near the counter exchanged glances, their voices dropping to a whisper. "Is that the man staying with the new Wrigley girl?" one said. "Mm-hmm, big city type, that he's hiding from something. Or hiding with her." By the time John loaded lumber into the back of his truck, 3 more people had given him that same curious, knowing look, the kind that said a rumor had already been born. 3 days later, the sound of a hammer echoed through the cottage as John finished replacing the porch steps. Tony sat cross-legged nearby, sorting nails into an old coffee tin, while providing a steady stream of questions about why nails were flat on one end and pokey on the other. Manda appeared in the doorway, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Break time," she announced. John wiped his hands on a rag and accepted one. "Thanks." She leaned against the frame, eyes dancing with amusement. "So, should I start charging you rent, or do you want to just go ahead and put your name on the mailbox?" John raised an eyebrow. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Oh, nothing," she said innocently. "Just that apparently, according to half the town, we're either a couple, you're my secret investor, or my runaway husband." He blinked. "Runaway husband?" "Yep. The post office clerk swears you came here to escape a bitter divorce. Then at the grocery store, I heard you're actually a big city scandal." She sipped her coffee. "You're quite the conversation piece." John shook his head, taking a drink. "Small towns half gossip, half bad guesswork." Manda smirked. "Which half is right?" "Neither," he said flatly, though there was a faint glint in his eyes. She tilted her head. "You don't seem too bothered." "I've heard worse." "At least this rumor comes with a roof to fix." Tony perked up. "Does that mean you're staying? Because angels don't just leave halfway through." Manda laughed. "Tony, Mr. Kane is busy. He's got his own life to—" "I've got time," John interrupted, surprising himself. "And apparently a reputation to live up to." She studied him for a moment, as if trying to decide whether he was teasing or serious. "Well, if you're going to be my scandal, you might as well make yourself useful." He smiled, just barely, and set his coffee down. "Hand me that wrench, Wrigley. Let's keep the town entertained." It was a quiet Thursday afternoon, the kind where the only sounds in Manda's cottage were the creak of floorboards and the rhythmic scrape of John sanding a windowsill. Tony was in the yard chasing a paper airplane. A sharp knock broke the calm. John opened the door to find 2 men in dark suits, their polished shoes out of place on the dirt path. "Mr. Kane?" the taller one asked. John's jaw set. "Who's asking?" "Peter Walsh, representing Mrs. Aurora Kane," the man said, handing over an envelope thick with papers. "Your wife is filing for divorce and is seeking 51% of Kane Innovations, citing marital contribution and reputational damage caused by your negligence in the relationship." Manda, standing a few feet behind, froze mid-step. The second lawyer, younger but just as smug, added, "She feels entitled to a controlling interest. Given the press fallout from your public incident, we suggest you settle quickly." John took the envelope without a word. Message received. Walsh smirked. "We'll be in touch." They turned and left, their black sedan kicking up dust as it disappeared down the lane. John closed the door, pulled out his phone, and typed 2 words into a secure app. Operation Dust. He hit send, his face unreadable. Manda crossed her arms. "What was that?" "Business," he said, setting the papers on the table. "That didn't look like business. That looked like someone just tried to steal your life." He exhaled slowly, then motioned toward the warm sofa. "You should probably hear the whole thing." They sat. John rested his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor for a moment, before meeting her eyes. "I built Kane Innovations from nothing. 15 years of my life, every dime reinvested, every risk calculated. Aurora came in year 6. She liked the parties, the image, the press, never the work. So why did you marry her?" "I thought I was supposed to," he admitted. "Every man at my level has the perfect wife for the perfect picture. I didn't realize I was just a step on her ladder until she said it out loud." Manda studied him. "And now she wants to own the ladder." "Exactly. But she's not getting it." He leaned back, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. "Operation Dust will make sure of that." "What is that?" "Something I designed for situations just like this. When someone tries to take what isn't theirs." She tilted her head. "And you're telling me this because you should know who you've been letting fix your porch." He said, "I'm not just a man running from a scandal. I'm a man making sure the right people lose." For a moment, Manda didn't speak. Then she said softly, "Just don't lose yourself in the process." By late afternoon, clouds had rolled in over the hills, thick and bruised, swallowing the sun. John was halfway through fixing the sagging porch rail. When the first rumble of thunder rolled across the valley, Tony was in the yard, chasing a soccer ball. But the moment the wind picked up, he froze and ran for the porch. "Storm's coming in fast," John said, glancing at the horizon. "Let's get inside." Minutes later, rain lashed against the windows, the sky flashing white with lightning. The sound of it drumming on the tin roof filled the cottage. Tony sat curled in the corner of the couch, knees tucked up, eyes wide. "I don't like storms," he whispered. John set his hammer aside and crouched down so they were eye level. "You know," he said, "when I was your age, storms scared me too. But my grandfather told me something that made them different." Tony tilted his head. "What? At storms are just the sky talking to the ground. Thunder is the sky's voice, and lightning is the ground's answer. It's just a conversation we get to listen in on." Tony's eyes softened, curiosity replacing fear. "Really?" John smiled faintly. "That's what I believed. And if you count between the flash and the boom, you can tell how far away they are. Want to try?" They sat together counting, 1, 2, 3, until the thunder followed, a little softer each time. By the third round, Tony was grinning. "It's moving away." "That's right," John said, ruffling his hair. From the kitchen doorway, Manda watched silently. She'd seen John measured, guarded, even blunt, but this gentle, patient version was new. When the rain eased into a steady patter, she cleared her throat. "You should stay for dinner. It's the least I can do after you've been here all day working." John straightened, glancing toward the door. "I don't want to be a bother. I insist." She cut in, her tone light but eyes holding his. They sat at her small kitchen table later, the smell of roasted chicken and herbs filling the air. Halfway through the meal, Manda set down her fork. "I have a secret too," she said quietly. John looked up, meeting her gaze. "Go on." She hesitated. "It's not just the cottage I inherited. My grandmother left me something else, something I haven't told anyone in this town yet." Her fingers traced the rim of her glass. "And if certain people find out, it could change everything." The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle outside, the sound mingling with the soft clink of silverware. Tony had excused himself to the living room, sprawled on the rug with his sketch pad, leaving John and Manda in the warm glow of the kitchen light. Manda swirled the wine in her glass, eyes fixed on the crimson ripple. "My grandmother, she wasn't just the woman who taught me to paint or plant tomatoes. She was a well-known author, though almost no one knew it was her." John raised an eyebrow. "A pen name?" She shook her head. "Worse. She used ghostwriters to keep herself hidden. A select few in the industry knew, but the public never did. She hated the attention, preferred her quiet life here, and when she passed, she left me more than this cottage." "What else?" John asked. "She owned half the county," Manda said, almost as if the words embarrassed her. "Old farmland, forest acreage, commercial buildings. I had no idea until her lawyer read the will." John leaned back. "Half the county," he repeated. "That's not nothing." "That's not all," she added, glancing toward the living room to make sure Tony was out of earshot. "I also own 2 large art galleries, one here in state, the other in Chicago." John studied her. "You run them?" "Not exactly. I hired people I trust. I'm hands-on with the exhibits, but I don't advertise that I'm the owner. I like being anonymous." "You sound a lot like your grandmother." She smiled faintly. "Maybe I am." He took a sip of his coffee. "And Tony's father?" Her voice softened. "He passed 4 years ago. Left me half his business." John's gaze sharpened. "What business?" Manda smiled, leaning back in her chair. "Can't spill everything in one night, John. Kane, where's the fun in that?" He smirked, but there was a flicker of curiosity he didn't bother hiding. "You're not what you seem, Wrigley." "Neither are you," she countered, her eyes meeting his without flinching. For a moment, the only sound was the soft patter of rain and the low hum of the refrigerator. 2 people who had walked into each other's lives by accident, now sitting across from one another, with more questions than answers. It was Saturday morning, and the town square was buzzing with the weekend market. Manda was at her booth, displaying a few of her smaller paintings, chatting with neighbors. John had just carried over a new easel for her when a sleek black SUV pulled up along the curb. Aurora stepped out in a fitted cream coat, her heels clicking against the pavement. Even from across the square, her presence turned heads. The two lawyers from before flanked her like bodyguards. "Manda Wrigley," Aurora called, her voice slicing through the chatter. Manda stiffened, paintbrush still in her hand. "Yes?" Aurora smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You've been very busy, haven't you? Playing the struggling artist while stealing another woman's husband." A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. Manda blinked. "Excuse me?" "Oh, don't play innocent," Aurora continued, loud enough for everyone in earshot. "It all makes sense now. Why he didn't react when I confronted him. You two have been having an affair this whole time, haven't you?" John stepped forward, his tone cool. "Elira." She turned to him with mock sweetness. "Oh, don't bother denying it, John. I know how to connect the dots." Her lead lawyer stepped forward, handing John a manila envelope. "Revised divorce papers. Given the newly revealed circumstances, Mrs. Kane is now requesting 60% of your company and a public admission of infidelity to protect her reputation." John took the envelope without looking at it, tucking it under his arm as if it contained nothing more than a grocery list. "Are you finished?" Aurora's smirk deepened. "For now." She pivoted, heels clicking as she and her entourage strode back to the SUV. The crowd murmured as they drove away, some faces skeptical, others eager for the next piece of gossip. Manda turned to John, frustration and confusion written all over her face. "How do you stay so calm?" He glanced at her, the faintest curve of a smile on his lips. "When you know more than they think, it's easier to let them talk." She frowned. "Meaning?" "Meaning," he said, adjusting the envelope in his arm, "that Aurora is walking straight into a game she doesn't even know she's playing." That night, after the market confrontation, John sat at the small kitchen table in his rental cabin, the envelope from Aurora untouched beside his laptop. The room was dark, except for the glow of the screen. He typed quickly, sending a string of encrypted messages to contacts only he trusted: private investigators, financial analysts, a discreet PR strategist. The subject line for each was the same: Operation Dust, active deployment. By midnight, pieces of the plan were already in motion. Leaks to certain journalists about Aurora's spending habits, quiet calls to shareholders about her real intentions, and a carefully timed audit of Kane Innovations' board activities. Every move designed not just to protect his company, but to dismantle the image Aurora had built for herself. The next morning, John drove down the winding lane to the cottage. Tony was out front, chalking a crooked rainbow onto the walkway. Manda was inside, rinsing brushes in the sink. She looked up when he came in. "You're early." "I have to head back to the city," he said, his tone calm but purposeful. She set the brush down slowly. "For the divorce?" "For a lot of things, but mainly to take back control of the narrative before Aurora burns both of us down." Manda crossed her arms. "John, I can handle gossip." "This isn't gossip," he said firmly. "It's calculated character assassination. She's dragging your name into this because she knows it's easier to make people doubt me when there's someone to point at." Manda's brows knit. "And what exactly do you plan to do in the city?" "End it," he said simply. "But I'm not doing it without making sure your name is cleared in the process." She blinked, taken aback. "Why does my name matter so much to you?" John's gaze softened, though his voice stayed steady. "Because you don't deserve to be collateral damage in a fight you never asked for. And because—" He hesitated, then added, "I'd rather have you there to see how this ends than have you hear it secondhand." She let out a slow breath. "You're asking me to walk into the middle of your war." "I'm asking you to trust me," he corrected, "just for a few days." Manda studied him for a long moment, searching for the man she'd come to know. The one who could fix a porch railing and calm a frightened child. But also the one with steel in his voice when someone threatened what mattered. Finally, she nodded once. All right, Kane. Let's see how your Operation Dust works. A faint smile touched his lips. Pack a bag. We leave at sunrise. The next morning, the glass towers of Kane Innovations gleamed under the city sun. John walked into the executive conference room with Martha at his side. His expression calm, calculated. Everything? He asked quietly. Martha handed him a sleek black folder. Every document, every recording, every verified source. It's all in order. Good. He took his seat at the head of the table, nodding toward the large monitor mounted on the far wall. Aurora had been summoned for a 10 a.m. board meeting. A formality, according to the email she received. But when she swept into the room in a tailored cream suit, her stride faltered. Sitting halfway down the table, serene and composed, was Manda Wrigley. Aurora's eyes narrowed. What is she doing here? John didn't rise. She's here because her name was dragged into this mess by you. I intend to make sure she walks out with her reputation intact. Aurora gave a tight laugh. Oh, please. This is a divorce, John, not a morality play. We both know I have the leverage here. John steepled his fingers. By the time you leave today, you'll agree to whatever I choose to give you. She leaned back, amused. Is that a threat? No, he said evenly. It's a forecast. The board members exchanged glances. The chair cleared his throat. Let's proceed, Mr. Kane. John tapped the remote in his hand. The monitor flickered to life, displaying a high-resolution spreadsheet. First item, John began, offshore accounts in your name. Accounts you've never disclosed in our marital or corporate filings. Aurora's smile faltered. That's ridiculous. Each account traced to deposits totaling $12 million over the past 6 years, John continued, flipping to the next slide. Funds linked directly to transactions with known competitors of Kane Innovations. Aurora shot to her feet. The board chair raised a hand. Mrs. Kane, you will have your time to respond. Sit down. Aurora's jaw tightened. But she dropped back into her seat. Second, John said, advancing the slide. A series of photographs filled the screen. Aurora, slipping out of restaurants, stepping into cars, always in the company of Edward Bishop, CEO of their biggest rival. Gasps rippled through the boardroom. These were taken over 3 years, John explained. Not casual encounters, strategic meetings. Many on nights you claimed to be at charity events. Aurora's voice rose. You had me followed? I had my company protected, John replied coolly. He pressed the button again. The next slide displayed an archived email chain. This, John said, is the email you leaked to the press 3 years ago, claiming Kane Innovations was in serious financial trouble. A lie. The leak caused our stock to drop 12% in a single day. He tapped again. A chart appeared showing the stock plummet, followed by a sharp rise days later. And here, he continued, are your personal brokerage records showing you shorted the stock before the leak, netting yourself over $4 million in profit. Aurora slammed her palm on the table. You have no proof those trades were mine. John's voice stayed level. It's in your name, Aurora, your account, your timestamp. She stood again, pointing at him. You're destroying me because I wanted out. The board chair's voice cut through her protest. Mrs. Kane, one more outburst and I'll have security remove you. You will have your time to disprove the evidence after Mr. Kane finishes. Aurora sank back into her chair, her face pale but her eyes still burning. John turned to the board. Given these actions, corporate sabotage, insider trading, collusion with competitors, I recommend we freeze any funds connected to Mrs. Kane within company holdings pending a full investigation. The board chair looked around the table. All in favor? Hands rose one by one. Motion carried. The chair turned to Aurora. Effective immediately, all accounts linked to Kane Innovations in your name are frozen until further notice. Aurora's hands trembled, though whether from rage or fear, no one could tell. She gathered her bag with stiff, jerky movements and strode out without another word. Silence hung in the air for a moment before Martha cleared her throat. Well, that was decisive. Manda, who had sat quietly through the entire exchange, leaned toward John. That was Operation Dust? John finally allowed the faintest smile. That was just the first sweep. She shook her head in disbelief. Wow. He glanced at her, his voice quieter now. I told you I don't start a fight I don't intend to finish. As they stood to leave, Manda caught his sleeve. John? Yeah. Thanked you for clearing my name in front of them. You didn't have to. He looked at her for a long moment. I did. Because you're part of the truth I'm keeping. For the first time since arriving in the city, Manda found herself smiling. Because in that boardroom, she'd seen the man everyone feared, and the man who, in private, could still choose to protect her. The morning after the board meeting, John sat in his office, with the city skyline stretching behind him. The sun had barely cleared the rooftops when he picked up the phone and dialed Aurora's lead attorney, Peter Walsh. Mr. Kane, Walsh greeted cautiously. I assume you've called to discuss yesterday's theatrics. John's voice was calm, almost cordial. I've called to discuss terms. A pause. Terms? Yes, John said, flipping through the thick file Martha had compiled. Here's how this will go. Mrs. Aurora is the property. Kane will issue a public apology to Manda Wrigley by name, retracting every false claim she made. She will also return every cent she's stolen from this company over the last 6 years. That includes the $12 million in offshore accounts, the profits from her insider trades, and any assets she purchased with those funds. That's, Walsh began, but John cut him off. Or, John said smoothly, I hand everything over to the district attorney and push for criminal charges, wire fraud, insider trading, corporate espionage. I have more than enough evidence for a conviction that comes with real prison time. The line went quiet. There's more, John continued, his tone tightening. Aurora will not receive a single dime in settlement money. She needs to review the fine print in the prenup she signed. Page 12, Section 4, Clause C. The Infidelity Clause. Walsh hesitated. You can't. I can, John said, his voice low, deliberate. And I will. She broke it the moment she stepped into Bishop's hotel suite, and I have photographs, timestamps, and security footage. The prenup is ironclad. Her actions void any financial claim against me or my company. Another pause. Then, Walsh sighed. If I bring this to her, she's going to. She'll do what she's told, John interrupted. Or she'll spend the next decade in court and possibly the next 15 years in prison. Her choice. He leaned back in his chair, gaze flicking to the photo on his desk. Tony's crooked smile in the background of one of Manda's art fair snapshots. And one more thing, John said. That apology? It happens in the same press circle she used to smear Manda's name. I want the same faces hearing the truth. Walsh exhaled sharply. I'll convey your terms. Do that, John said, ending the call. He sat for a moment in the quiet, the tension in his shoulders loosening just slightly. It wasn't victory yet, but it was the kind of position where the other side had no moves left. When Manda arrived at the office later that morning, he met her at the elevator. What was that call? She asked. John offered a faint, satisfied smile. Just tying up loose ends. You'll get your apology. Her brow furrowed. You really think she'll give it? Oh, she will, he said, because this time, she's the one with no choice. 2 days later, the press conference took place on the steps of Kane Innovations. Camera crews jostled for position, reporters craning their necks as Aurora stepped up to the podium in a pale suit and oversized sunglasses. John stood a few feet behind, hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. Manda was next to him, her presence calm but steady. Aurora cleared her throat, her voice carrying over the hum of equipment. I would like to make a public statement regarding certain remarks I made in recent weeks about Manda Wrigley. She hesitated, clearly forcing the words out. Those remarks were false, and I regret the damage they caused to Ms. Wrigley's reputation. She was not at any time involved in an inappropriate relationship with my husband during our marriage. A flurry of camera shutters went off. Aurora glanced at her prepared notes, her voice tightening. I take full responsibility for the statements I made in anger, and I apologize publicly to Miss Wrigley and her family for the harm and distress my actions caused. The moment she stepped back from the podium, John moved forward. That will be all for today, he told the press before guiding Manda away from the chaos. They drove in silence for the first hour out of the city, the skyline shrinking in the rearview mirror. The tension in Manda's shoulders eased with every passing mile, the air outside the car windows growing cleaner, cooler. By the time they turned down the dirt lane to the cottage, the sun was setting, washing the hills in gold and amber. Tony was out front with one of the neighbors, flying a bright red kite that tugged wildly in the evening breeze. He dropped the string and ran to the car the second he saw them. "You're back." "Did you win?" John smiled faintly. "Something like that." Inside, the cottage smelled faintly of cedar and paint, Manda's latest project drying in the corner. She set her bag down on the table, running her hand over the familiar wood grain. "It's strange," she said softly. "After all that noise in the city, this place feels even quieter than before." "Quiet's good," John replied, leaning in the doorway. "Means no one's trying to burn your life down." She turned toward him, a small smile tugging at her lips. "And yours?" He shrugged, but there was a hint of warmth in his voice. "I've had enough fire for one lifetime." Tony's laughter rang from outside, and for the first time in weeks, Manda felt the weight of other people's words lifting from her shoulders. "You know," she said, "you could stay for dinner." John gave a small nod. "I was hoping you'd say that." And as the last light faded beyond the hills, the three of them settled back into the rhythm they'd started before the city tried to pull them apart. A rhythm that this time felt a little more like home. 2 weeks later, the morning air over the valley was bright and sharp, the kind of day that made the hills look like they'd been painted in greens and golds. John stood on the cottage porch, a mug of coffee warming his hands, watching Tony race down the lane with his kite bobbing behind him. Manda was inside, humming softly as she worked on a new canvas. It had been days since the press had moved on from Aurora's apology, but the headline still lingered online. Kane Innovations clears CEO, ex-wife under investigation. John hadn't returned to the city since. He didn't need to. Martha had handled the last board meeting in his absence. By unanimous vote, the company accepted his resignation as CEO, effective immediately, along with the sale of his shares. The transfer papers had been signed just yesterday, the final wire hitting his account this morning. He stepped inside, leaning against the kitchen doorway. "So," he said casually, "how do you feel about me buying this place?" Manda looked up from her palette, a brush still in her hand. "You mean my grandmother's cottage?" "Exactly, along with the 10 acres around it. Figure you'll need space if you ever want to expand your studio." She blinked. "You're serious?" "Completely." He set his mug down and handed her a folded piece of paper. "And while I was at it, I set up something else. The Wrigley Foundation. Housing grants and microloans for single mothers trying to start over. First year's funding is already in place." Her eyes widened as she read, her fingers tightening on the paper. "John, why?" "Because you know how to turn a blank canvas into something worth keeping," he said simply. "And I think more people deserve that chance." She set the paper down, stepping closer. "You're really done with your company?" "I built it to prove I could," he said. "I'm leaving it because I don't need to prove anything anymore." His gaze softened. "Not to them, and not to you." From outside, Tony's voice floated in through the open window. "Mom, John, the kite's flying higher than ever." John smiled. "Guess we should go see that." But before they stepped outside, Manda touched his arm. "You know, you're not our traveling angel anymore." He raised a brow. "No?" "No," she said, her smile warm. "You're just ours." They walked out together into the sunlight, Tony's laughter rising above the breeze, the cottage standing solid and bright behind them, a place where the storms had passed and the future stretched wide open. The end. Thanks for listening to his wonderful story by Green Tea Tales. Support our channel with comments, likes, and subscribe. Thank you.